The main objective of this lesson is just the introduction to the risk assessment and safety issues in Svalbard. This will be just short overview over possible risks and safety measures when I conduct my field work. I took part in many projects, I conducted many types of field work, so I met many risks, and as you can see I'm still here, so nothing actually happened bad, but it's because I was prepared. And because we have only 30 minutes, for me it's not possible to provide all the answers or detailed descriptions of how to act in every situation. In Svalbard, once you're there, you just have, different weather, different conditions, different terrain. So you can see many different, you can be step into different situations and different hazards, and you need to be prepared for everything. In this 30 minutes lesson, I won't show you everything, so you have to learn more after that. But what I want to say, it is crucial that each person has to acquire the knowledge before going to the Arctic. So first of all, just for remembering, Svalbard archipelago is in high north in the Arctic. That means that the climate there is really cold. It's really close to the North Pole. When you go there, first of all, you experience nature, which is most unique, beautiful, and magnificent. It's always fascinating to see the fauna. There is also cultural heritage, and there's beautiful landscapes around. So it's really worth to go there. And actually, I'm in love in the Arctic. That's why I'm going there since 2008 every year. This environment is very vulnerable and requires careful travel. That means that you can harm yourself, and that's something that you don't want to do, so you have to be prepared. And during these lessons, I'll just show you some hazards and some safety challenges that you can meet in Svalbard. First of all, what has to be said is that all activities depend on rapidly changing weather. The weather there is not stable. It changes quickly. So we can have even 4 seasons in 24 hours. It can be sunny when you go out. You can have just short t-shirt with you. But you have to be prepared for the changes because it can be even snowing just 1 hour after that. Usually in the Arctic it's cold and windy. When there are low clouds and, for example, fog, you will have limited visibility, so you won't see far distances. There is also cold water. If you fall into that water, into fjord, it will be really cold. You would die in just 3 minutes. Or if you're lucky, maybe some more. But if you don't have special gear to protect yourself, you will freeze over in this water. There are also glacial and slope processes that happen there. There are no roads, so when you travel, you go on foot, on skis, or on snowmobile, or on a rubber boat, and these are long distances. Usually when the weather is nice, the visibility is great, so you can see even 50 kilometers in front of you. And you think it's not that far to reach that point, but there's no trees, there's usually no buildings for the scale. So when you want to go somewhere, first you have to check what's the distance to that point, because it can be several hours and even longer. There's also direct threat from polar bears and other wildlife that I will also present. There's also limited communication network. That means that your mobile phone that works in Poland, in Romania, and Albania, it won't work in Svalbard. It will work only in close surroundings of the settlements. For example, if you're in Longyearbyen or Barentsburg, you will have the connection, mobile connection. But if you go far away from the settlements, there will be no connection. And for example, in Hornsund, there is no mobile connection. There is only Wi-Fi inside the station, But once you go out, you have no connection using the mobile phone. So you can only use it as a watch or calculator, whatever, or just camera if you want to take pictures with a small camera inside the phone. What can happen? It can be small mistakes and problems there, and problems that you could have back in your country. But in Svalbard, those problems can lead to severe situations. For example, if you will twist your ankle in the mountains, if you're far from some settlements, from the station, far from anyone, and without any communication, so imagine what to do if you have twisted ankle and you cannot walk. Yeah, it would take long time before you go back to this safety. So only small mistakes can lead to severe situations. Of course, there are also accidents, things that you cannot avoid because they just happen. But you have to be prepared for everything that you can meet in the field. So if you need to call for help, the evacuation can take time or even be impossible if there's bad weather. And in Svalbard, I will show you how the weather can look like. Just this short video. It's recorded from the station, so I was in pretty warm place. But just few meters from the station, you can see this blizzard. You cannot see anything. The wind is very strong, so it's hard to stand. If you have clothes like I had here, it was okay to go out. But still, without any visibility, you can meet polar bear, for example, or fall into crevasse. But let me switch to further slides. The main goal of this lesson is to identify possible risks and avoid problems. Once you are in the field, you have to think, what if? So there is you want to go somewhere, you want to do some field work, you want to measure something, and all the surroundings, all the way before you get to the point where you want to conduct your measurements, there can be different difficulties. For example, there can be river crossing. There can be local weather conditions. If it's exposed, there can be high wind speeds, especially high in the mountains. The wind can be really strong. On the glaciers, if you walk on the glaciers, there are crevasses, so cracks in the ice that you can fall into. On fjords, there is shallow water. That means that there can be bigger waves and also rocks underneath the water. So once you go on boat, you can hit the rocks that you cannot see. That's why you need a map. You have to prepare yourself, and you have to know where you want to go. And something else, you have to inform others where you're going, when you're coming back, what's the time that the safety time. That means if you won't come back at the given time, that usually we use just handbooks. We write when we go out. We say who's going, where, and what's the coming back time. And when you cross this time, if you're later, then the person on duty, there is always someone on duty on the radio, because we have radios such as this one, VHF radio. This usually works from long distances, but behind the mountains you can have no connection with such small radio. So you can be on the other side of the fjord. If there will be no mountain on the way, the person on duty will hear you and will know that you need some help. But without connection, you have to think about it always. So what if? What you have to do first is the risk identification and assessment. What will happen if I will go there? What can happen? What if something goes wrong? For example, there are different risks. Nature, your activities, your gear, and human-related. For example, if you rely on snowmobile, if you go somewhere to the field you're driving snowmobile, but it can, you know, it's just device, right? So it can crash, it can stop working, and then you have problems. So we have to be prepared to walking back, for example. So you need your skis if you go into deep snow, because you can drive snowmobile easily, but walking through the deep snow, it's really problematic. So you evaluate the risks. What's the probability and what are the consequences? What you can do is take protective measures to minimize risks and all the problems. So you just make the decisions. First, before you go, you just plan and check conditions. The best thing to do is check the weather forecast, check the ocean tides, because, you know, tides, the sea level changes there up to 2 meters. So if you go somewhere, it can be shallow or it can be deep. Your boat can float away from the shore. So you just check those. Then you follow safety routines in the field. So you use safety gear. And in the field, everything can happen. So before you do something, you have to do 3 things. Just stop, think, evaluate your thinking, and then you act. So if you need to change your plans, for example, you didn't plan that your colleague will fall into crevasse, but you don't want to jump behind him to this crevasse because you want to help him. You don't want to put yourself in dangerous situation. So before you act, it doesn't have to be long time. Just first, don't move for just few seconds. Plan what to do. Check what are the conditions, and then act. Never act just in a second, because safety first. Then there is accident management and rescue to minimize damage. So if you have safety and emergency gear with you, then you just consider what are the surroundings, what are the possibilities to solve the situation, the risky situation. And then you want to reach the further safety and keep warm. What are the weather hazards? Those are different in different seasons. In Svalbard, winters are long and cold. Polar night, that means there's no sun at all from the end of October till February. There's also short spring and autumn. These are just short transition periods when the snow disappears, and just before summer, when there is melting of the snow on the tundra and also on glaciers. And summers are short and cool. That means that there's nothing like warm days in Svalbard. You need to have many layers of your clothes just to be warm in different seasons, and you have to be prepared. As I mentioned, there can be even 4 seasons during 24 hours. So it can be snowy, it can be sunny, it can be rainy. You have to be prepared. Just to mention the average temperatures for decadal, that's the decadal average for each day of the year. As you can see, that's for Hornson Station. In January, recently we observed mean temperatures around -6. In March, it's colder, so average temperature is around -12. During summer, the temperatures are as high as +5 degrees on average, but the maximum can reach up to 15 degrees. So it can be pretty warm. But throughout the year, actually, this chart presents the average temperatures. But if you will see the daily data, that's daily data since 1979 to 2014. You can see for each day of the year, there is high variability of the temperatures. During summer, the temperatures are pretty stable, so around 5 and 0 degrees. But in other months, other than July, August, and June as well, there can be different temperatures, and it can be also windy. And with strong winds, there is something called wind chill index. And this index does not lower the actual temperature. So if you measure the temperature, it will be, for example, +5 or 0 or -5. But with this index, it corresponds to the temperature that the human being, the person, would feel in a very light wind. So with strong winds, the temperatures that you feel are lower than measured. And that's something that can lead to the frostbites. What's a frostbite? If you have exposed areas of the body, typically it begins on the toes, on your feet, fingers, or nose. If these are exposed to low temperatures, skin and underlying tissues, the layers under the skin on your body, begin to freeze. Then this is frostbite if they freeze. The first symptom of the frostbite is numbness. So you will have stiff, for example, fingers. They will be numb. And that makes the difficulties to move your fingers or toes. You will have difficulties in motion in your hands, or you'll have walking problems. Next, you will notice a white coloration of the affected skin. I mentioned about the wind chill factor. Here you can see if the air temperatures are as on the x-axis, so 0, -5, -10, -15, depending on the wind speed, which is shown here on the y-axis. The wind speed with with 10 kilometers per hour, 15 kilometers an hour, 20 kilometers an hour. Depending on the wind speed, you will feel the different temperatures. Just feel, not measure. You will measure still. For example, when the wind will be 10 kilometers per hour, the measured temperature will be -20. You will feel -27. And the colors here show the possibilities of frostbites. And that's something that you want to avoid. You have to keep yourself warm. If not, you will have problems, and sorry for this picture. I know it's dramatic, but it happens. Frostbites, if you go outside in cold conditions, you have to make sure to wear multiple layers of clothing and always cover your hands and face. It is important also to drink plenty of fluids. So, for example, water. If you will freeze your fingers, you will freeze your nose, you can lose it, as guy on this picture. In such conditions, if it's windy, it's cold, you have to consider if it's important to go out and do the measurements, or it will be more safe to stay and don't do anything. Stay in safety, in warm place, and then if the weather changes, you will go out. Or you just prepare yourself for different conditions. For example, during winter, I use the suit that I want to show you. I have it behind me. Yeah. So, this is my special suit for cold conditions. I don't want to put it on because it's really warm in Warsaw. But as you can see, it's really thick. It has hoodie. So I can cover myself and I can be prepared for bad weather conditions. It's thick and warm, so it makes you warm even in bad weather conditions. So if you're having such gear, for example, here are, that's me and my colleague, we have also helmets because we're driving on snowmobiles. Even though it was -20 degrees, for us, we were prepared, we were warm, it was okay. But you have to be prepared. You need clothes and equipment. And here is the list of important information. You need clothing that should be adapted for the season and should always be windproof and waterproof. Additional clothing is needed for extreme weather conditions that can happen. Especially during winter, it is important that you are able to cover all bare skin. So you hide your face, you hide your fingers. If you will have them exposed, they will freeze. You need several layers. which are more effective than just one thick layer. So if you walk, you will be warm, but once you stop, you will be cold. That means that when you're walking, you need less layers. Once you stop and do the measurements, you put on your extra jacket or down jacket. Shoes and clothing must be big enough to fit extra insulating layers. That means that you have a jacket that fits you. You look tiny, you look great, but it has to be bigger because you will need layers underneath this jacket. There is no single piece of wonder clothing. That's nothing like this. Nothing is for every condition. So you need to take all things that will cover your needs. So varied clothing that are adapted to your needs and your excursion. Whatever you do, you need different things to carry with you. And you need to bring extra mittens and extra hat, even on short excursions, because you can lose them. You just take out your glove to do the measurement, then it's windy, and your glove, for example, can be just taken away by wind to the fjord. If you won't find it, you will have problems because you will have, bare hand, so you can have frostbite. That's why you need one extra pair at least. Something that you also need is strong, stable hiking boots, sometimes rubber boots because it can be wet. You need also headwear and gloves. Yeah, I mentioned that, so about extras. And you need those extra layers and spare clothing. During low visibility, as you can see here, this terrain is flat, but you just see 20 meters in front of you, so it's easy to get lost. That's why you need a map, compass, and GPS. For example, here I have GPS that I use during the field work. So, yeah, I rely on it, but, it has batteries, and batteries can run low. So, first of all, if you have batteries in some equipment, you want to keep it close to your body because it will be warmed. If you have batteries in your jacket in outside pockets, for example, the batteries will go low because of low temperatures. So the necessary things are map, because you will always have it. It doesn't work on batteries. Compass also work without batteries. And GPS. That's something least reliable. There are also slope hazards, such as rockfalls, landslides, snow avalanches. In Svalbard, there are no tracks for tourists, so wherever you go, wherever you want to reach some point, there will be no path. You will just go whenever you can. And sometimes, when you go on steep slopes, there are rockfalls. Or landslides, as in this example. What are the risks? There is sedimentary mountains, so loose materials, loose stones, blockfall and tumble stones. So if there is person above you, such as in this picture, there is my colleague above me, he was just walking down and he was kicking stones, not because he wanted that. They were just loose materials that were falling off. So it was pretty dangerous for me to be below. But I was just walking on sides, so that meant that whenever he was walking down, I wasn't below him, just on side of him walking. There's also possibility to fall and injure yourself because of those loose rocks and gravels, especially those are slippery during rain conditions, when they're wet. So in steep mountain terrain, you need helmets if you want to avoid being hit by the rock. So you put on helmet if it's steep and there is loose material that can hit you from above. You need stable, proper hiking boots. And you have to walk carefully and slowly. If there will be rockfall below you, just inform your colleagues that are below. My friend above was screaming, "Rock is falling, be careful." And, for me it was okay. I knew that the rock was falling, I was prepared, so it was okay to walk in below. or on sites. In steep terrains during winter and spring, there can be avalanches, and that's something that you also have to be prepared for. To the field, we always take shovels, as this one here. That's my shovel, just in case if I'll need to help someone. I also use avalanche probe, which is, I can show you how it works, but I don't think that my camera will allow me to show everything. So that's something to stick into the snow to check the conditions. Especially important on the glaciers, you just put it down and check the thickness of snow, if there's crevasse underneath or not. Just check the snow conditions below you, if this will be stable or not. And we also use emergency beacons. That's sender and receiver. You need two of them, because if someone will be underneath the snow because he will fall into avalanche, this beacon will allow you to find him if he will have his own. So two will work. One, no, not. So if there is one person under the snow, the other one can look for the other person using this beacon. That's just transmitter and receiver for avalanches. What can happen on glaciers? Around 60% of Svalbard is covered by glaciers, and there are many potentially dangerous crevasses. There's also meltwater channels and moulins, and there's also local weather conditions. Snow-covered areas are of high risk, because if the glacier is covered with snow, you cannot see what's under the snow, and underneath the snow there can be crevasse just covered with a tiny layer of snow. That's why you need this snow probe, just to check if it's safe to walk on that. If there will be bare ice, blue ice areas are of lower risk, but those are slippery. So you need crampons and also gloves, because if you will fall, they will, the ice would cut your hands. For example, glaciologists, as me and my colleagues, we do the measurements of snow cover on the glaciers. So we dig snow pits, as you can see here. It's just snow pit that we measure the density of snow there. But underneath, if there's crevasse, if we would dig it out, and underneath, if there's crevasse, you can fall down even 30 or more meters. It happened once to my colleague, but he's okay. He had his gear, so he could help himself. But that's something you have to be aware of. Tiny layer of snow, and underneath there can be crevasse. So just check the conditions, if it's safe to walk there or not. If you don't want to go straight on the glacier, you just check if it's possible to go straight on or not. And there is lots of equipment for rescue on glacier, such as harness, ice axe, and crampons. I don't want to go into details because my lesson would be too long. So you need crampons and gloves, as I mentioned. That's something that you have to remember, and your snow probe, that's something that you always carry with you. If you will fall into crevasse, you can go out if you are prepared and if you're not injured. But if you are prepared, you have your all the gear that is needed for exploring caves. Yeah, you are prepared, so you can go down, you can go out, go up, as my colleagues do. Something else with the glaciers. The front of the glacier, the glacier that terminates in the sea, there is calving zone. That means calving, the huge blocks of ice are falling down into water, and there is tsunami wave. That's something that you have to be aware of. So you don't want to go too close on your rubber boat or whatever boat. Too close to the glacier is really, really dangerous. That's just the boat for the scale. So imagine if such block of ice would fall. Yeah, it can be really unpleasant. If you go through the valleys, you have to cross the rivers. And in Svalbard, there are many water-bearing valleys. The permafrost underneath keeps the water from draining deep, so it causes the spreading of water among the valley, and that makes the passage difficult. And the water carries sediment, so it turns brown, so we cannot see the bottom of the river. So it's pretty dangerous to also cross the rivers. You have to be prepared. If you are prepared, you're pretty safe if you have a special gear for doing measurements in the rivers. I've done many measurements. It was safe because I had this special suit for keeping myself safe. Something that you have to be aware of, you have to trust me that the picture taken from almost the same place, just the right one was taken from the rock which is on the left. And rivers and streams also vary drastically within hours. That's due to varying amounts of melting snow and ice from glaciers and also from precipitation. So you can have river which is just flowing slowly, but in some time it can change to rapid river with lots of water. So you have to be aware of such situations as well. Maybe you can jump over such small stream, but you cannot jump over such river into which it can change. So if you go on hiking, if you cross the river, you want wet boots or good clothes, and you should rather avoid jumping over where larger rocks are wet because they are slippery, these are unstable, you can injure yourself. Good places are wide, shallow, with bottom and depth that is checked, so we can just go when there are many smaller streams, for example, not just one stream that goes. So you can usually find safe place where you can cross the river. Just to mention sea ice conditions, these are also changing. So if you go on a rubber boat, you can have some sea ice or just blocks of ice floating. You don't want to hit them with the propeller of your engine. If you cross the fjords during spring, you can go on the sea ice with snowmobile. But what I take always with me is this ice claw. That's something that I just put around my neck. And here are the, pikes. There are two of them. And these are for taking myself out from the sea ice. If I will fall into the fjord, it won't be possible to use only my hands to take myself out. I will just dig myself out of this situation if I have this. And there's also a whistle here, so if you need some help, sometimes, it helps. If there will be someone to help you. But the thing is, we never go alone in the field. So if someone has a problem, there's always someone to get some help. And there's also lines and ropes that we carry. It's pretty cool to drive snowmobiles, but something that you have to remember is 1 hour drive will be at least 1 day of walking back, for example, to the station. If the snow is deep, you won't go fast walking because you will dig yourself into the snow. The snowmobile can just go far. It can be 50 kilometers an hour, it can be 100 kilometers an hour. But imagine if something happens to your snowmobile, then you will have to go back on foot. So it's better to have also all the equipment necessary for walking on the deep snow. If we go in far distances, we are prepared. So we are prepared to set a camp. As you can see on the sleds pulled behind the snowmobiles, there is equipment for all the safety issues. So we can also set up a camp. We have extra food. So if something happens, we will stay and we'll be safe. There is very real danger of walking into polar bears in Svalbard. There's plenty of them. So if you go in the field, if you see such tracks as here, you just have to be prepared to meet this guy. And the law, Norwegian law in Svalbard, says that a rifle for polar bear protection must always be brought on trips outside the settlements in Svalbard. Polar bears are under protection. These are huge, the biggest land predators, the biggest predators that you can meet on land. Polar bears are bigger than lions, than tigers, and they are predators, so they can hunt you. You need to be prepared to take care of yourself. If nothing else is possible, you have to shoot the bear, just for your own protection. But you don't want to do that, because polar bears are super cool, they are intelligent, great animals, and yeah, they are under protection because there's not that many of them. They struggle. So you need to carry gun outside the settlement, but you you are not allowed to bring your gun into the bank or post office. As you can see, there are signs in Longyearbyen. Below you can see the lady riding a bike after her shopping. She has a rifle behind her. Before you go to the field, even my experienced colleagues, as you can see, this one wanted to take picture of flowers. He put his gun on the ground. So you just check the gun if it works. If there's sand inside, it won't work. So just for safety reason, don't trust anyone who gives you a weapon. Be prepared, it has to be clean. You never put it on the ground as in this picture. That's just to show you what not to do. And you also need flare gun just to scare away the bear. And there are also other pyrotechnical aids to scare off the polar bear that you can meet in the field. Yeah, so it's better to observe polar bears from far distances and keep them away from you. But once you, I was in the camp in 2010 for 2 months. I spent 2 months in a tent, and we used a tripwire. That's the device with stretched wire between fixed points. So as you can see on the picture, around the tent there was tripwire. And there is mechanism that is triggered when it's touched. So if polar bear touches the wire, the material will explode or will give some sound or light. And that's something that we use when we go to the camp. But there were situations when these didn't work. So you don't rely on such things. On any equipment, actually, you shouldn't rely. You just have to be prepared, but just consider that everything can happen. Polar foxes, Arctic foxes, as here, these guys are pretty sweet. They look friendly, but they can have rabies, so you never feed them. They can bite you, and they can have rabies, so it can be dangerous. Walruses, they are dangerous in the water, so when you're on the rubber boat and huge body of walrus is approaching you, it's better not to stay close to it. Here is list of the mountain code. The most important information that I would like to give you. First, plan your trip and leave word of your route. That's something that I mentioned. We always put information where we go and when we are coming back. Then adapt your route to your ability and the conditions. Be weather-wise. That means check the forecast. Check the weather forecast, check the avalanche forecast, and check the ocean tides forecast. Be equipped for bad weather and frost, even on short trips. As I mentioned, the weather can change rapidly, so be prepared. Bring sufficient equipment to be able to help yourself and others. Make safe route choices. Recognize avalanche terrain and weak ice, for example, weak sea ice that you don't want to cross. Use a map and compass. Use GPS, but don't rely on batteries. Something that you always need to know is where you are. Turn back in time. If you plan something, if you cannot inform someone that you'll be late, just go back, and the retreat is no disgrace. So whatever you planned, you can always change your plans, you can do something in other time, but keep yourself safe. And the last thing is save your strength and seek shelter if it's necessary. And for calling help, we use this thing, that's emergency beacon, as you can see here. It has antenna, so if it's necessary, yeah, you just take the antenna out, and then you press the red buzzer here, and this equipment will call for help. This will give the information to the governor of Svalbard. So this will be action that will cost a lot, so you need insurance to cover it. You don't want to use it, you don't want to put yourself in dangerous situation, but if something happens, you just use such emergency beacon as this one. And sorry guys for making this lesson longer than I planned, but I wanted to tell you everything. Of course, it's not possible when you have such short time. So hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will go to the Svalbard to explore, to enjoy it. But just stay safe and consider whatever you do. Just stop, think, plan, and then act. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm still here. You can ask questions in the chat box.